So what we're going to talk about quickly, just thought we'd set the scene in terms of what we see across the public sector. So there's a new report that was released, which I'm going to run through. It's something we see no matter what sector we work in. We're going to briefly talk about secure by design, so case study with what we've done, and then we're going to talk about SOC, or SOC of the future anyway, which is something that should be on everyone's radar. If we can keep questions to the end, we'll get through, but happy to pick up questions when we get there. Okay. So yeah, just the current public sector landscape. There's a new review that came out in January. DSIP released it off the order of His Majesty the King. So I'm going to cover that in the next slide. But there's new regulations and frameworks coming out. So NIS 2 has had an update. There's potential update to the Data Protection Bill, which hasn't gone through Parliament yet. And there's new frameworks that have been released across the public sector. So we've got the National Cybersecurity Centre Cyber Assessment Framework, and we've also got Secure by Design principles, which we will cover today. It's all about resilience. So it is when, not if. That's the model everyone's got to be thinking about. And obviously, the pace and change of technology now, it's at a pace we've never seen before. Even going back 5 years, technology was relatively static. It's not like that anymore. There's introduction of technology by stealth as well. So just to set the scene, there was a report released in January. So if you do a Google for the State of the Digital Government Review, I know this is quite a busy slide, but it kind of sets the tone and everything we see. So cyber risk is critically high. I think the threat is something I've never seen at this level before. So 34% of government organisations were reported to have a major cyber incident last year. In reality, I think that's probably higher. Since 2014, we've seen Station 8-sponsored cyber attacks going through with Russia against Ukraine, with what's going on. Cyber warfare threat is through the roof. But what we're also seeing on top of that, cyber crime industry. So a couple of years ago, that was valued at $2.2 trillion industry. By the end of 2025, that's meant to be tipped to a $10 trillion industry. So in the last few years, we've seen a fourfold increase in cyber organised crime. When you add that on top of the foreign intelligence, espionage, cyber warfare, it's only going to get worse. And then obviously the introduction, so how we see organisations getting attacked is through the supply chain. It's the number one threat. NCSC have been announcing that for a number of years now. But the way that gets enacted is through insecure applications in the software development lifecycle. And I'm sure you've all seen the introduction of DeepSeek recently. We've got a talk on that this afternoon, but DeepSeek is a very interesting one. Where we're going to see it come in is definitely through the supply chain because it's a low-cost AI model. But we'll cover that this afternoon. So the report also detailed that half of services lacked a digital pathway or strategy, which is scary. So no plan to move into the digital future. Combat that with the fact that most end users now expect some form of digital services. They don't want to speak to people. They want to do things easily on the mobile devices or headless chatbots. But the fact that half government organisations haven't put that into the strategy, which is quite scary. 27% of organisations report that the current data infrastructure doesn't support a future model. They don't have a comprehensive view across their IT estate, which, if you think about when we're looking at introducing AI, data, machine learning, you need to have that data quality. So 27% of organisations didn't feel like they had the right level of data or view. Critical services. So we're now seeing a report of 28% of organisations. So this is typically central government are running legacy systems, legacy technology. In the police and healthcare, I know we've got some guys from NHS and police in here. That was reported up to 60-70%, which is very scary. But moving forward, so across the whole UK public sector, we spend about 26 billion on technology, which is quite a big number. But in average, when you compare that against other nations, we're actually 30% less in spend. So what that means is this year it went up 2% increase to 28% legacy infrastructure. Next year we're going to see more legacy infrastructure come out. So it's potentially going to get worse. And obviously the move over the last few years was to go to cloud adoption. 60% of government bodies have now migrated to the cloud, but what we typically see is it's not been re-architected, it's just been lifted and shifted. So we're not seeing the efficiencies, the costs, you're not getting the benefit there. But so yeah, it's not been effective. Access to core skills is an issue. We're finding public sector cannot find and retain and develop the right skills, especially in the cyberspace. And the average cost of using a contractor or an associate is 3 times higher, but we're just not going to get access to skills. And then digital leadership, in contrast to the private sector where you have chief roles, so digital, data, cyber, they're not seeing that in the public sector, which means there is no digital voice or cyber voice typically across the public sector, which means it's not driving forward. And then finally, the buying power. So what the report highlighted was you've got the ability to look at things holistically. An example was NHS trusts would typically go out and buy their own stuff separately. You've got an example where 320 local authorities, local councils buy their own digital services. We see that in some of the customers where you've got a central government with all the ALBs underneath. There's no cohesive approach for buying technology, which means it's all done individually. We're all doing the same assurance and due diligence. We're repeating the same things, but we're not getting the benefit of buying power to strong arm the suppliers as well. So definitely encourage people to have a look at that report. And this is something we see across all sectors. So just when it comes to security, additional things we're seeing there is most cyber programs, people think it's going to be solved by technology or by buying a new thing. That's definitely not the approach. And what we find is when you buy something, there's no consideration for how it actually runs in reality. Some of these tools and technologies, you've got to have an army to operate in the background. And the problem is, once you've turned it on, you're actually consciously aware, so you're liable. You can be reckless if not. So sometimes not being aware is a good approach, but it's the resource and off the back. In almost every instance, when we look at assessments and working with customers with strategy, we find they've gone out and bought various different technology, and a lot of these technology tool sets overlap in capability. So you've actually got features and capability, but they're not turned on. And the problem with that is the more technology you've got, the more data you've got, they don't often integrate with each other, so you've got various different views, and there's no single pane of glass. So it makes it harder for your internal teams to manage. The addition to that is the more technology you've got to train your staff, and if you do take the time to train your staff, unfortunately they become more attractive to the market. So we're a commercial business, we do provide services to the public sector, but we have to review salaries twice a year just to try and keep people within the business. You can't do that in the public sector. So the more technology you've got, more skills you've got, they're just going to get absorbed by commercial organisations, unfortunately. And typically one thing we see is something is bought to solve a problem, it just isn't deployed effectively. Common thing is a project will be established to buy something, get it into live, and then it drops off a cliff. There's no ongoing maintenance assurance. In some instances, they think it's there, but it's not reporting back. These are common things we see. So what would I recommend? You need to have a clear strategy and roadmap. And off the back of that, roles and responsibilities, a defined RACI, but just have a plan. What have you got? What are you going to get rid of? How are you going to standardise and simplify? Look at the tooling you've got. So obviously with government, there's Microsoft, you've got the E5 licenses there. It's got some very good technology, but equally there's other services there. Make sure that what you have got, you're making use of the technology rather than buying something new, and make sure it's configured effectively and it's actually going back to your login solution. Have a plan for exit. the amount of times we work with a customer, they know they want to get rid of something, but they never exit on time. So they end up buying a new solution, ready to pull something out. They don't know that they had a 3-month notice, or they haven't planned the exit or the migration. You need to plan it out and literally just put everything you've got in front of you, but factor in the exit when you've got to notify your supplier if you are planning to exit. Logging and monitoring, we're going to cover SOC in this presentation, but one of the things that if you haven't got this in place already, make sure you've got a login and monitoring solution. So it's all good having all this technology, but if it isn't feeding somewhere centrally, you might as well give up. And then strategic partner, the way we tend to work with customers is you don't always have the skills and capability inside the public sector. Find a partner who is going to help make you the intelligent customer. Find someone who's going to help challenge your suppliers. Have you bought the right thing? Are you getting the right service? The commitment they've signed up to? Just get someone on the inside to work as your strategic partner is definitely what I recommend.
Secure by Design, firstly, is mandated by the Central Data and Digital Office, but also is a key opportunity to harness and drive some real efficiencies and effective cybersecurity management out the back of it. So I'm keen to try and give you some opportunities that we've seen to go forward with that. And first of all, before I go any further, how many people in this room is aware of the government Secure by Design activities that are mandated? Okay, fantastic. So that's probably about half of the room, so clearly it's getting out there. So what is Secure by Design? So Secure by Design is an activity mandated, as I said, by the Central Data and Digital Office. And it's phased in 2 tiers. So the first tier, core government departments and arm's length bodies are meant to be picking this up currently, and tier 2 to be following in the next 12 months. So with that, obviously implementation comes. In theory, this is nothing new. Cybersecurity has already been happening. All this is providing you that framework in order to make sure that it's from the outset of project and program delivery, and making sure that you have cybersecurity risk management all the way through your product lifecycle. So what does Secure by Design give you, your government department, your organisation? So I appreciate that some people probably see it as this is another thing that needs to be implemented. You're right, that's absolutely a part of it. However, there are so many other benefits that can be harnessed through this and actually make cybersecurity risk management far more efficient. So the first part, proactive governance and assurance. Albeit this is for projects and programs to embed, what this does do is it provides you, if implemented correctly, key reporting functions back up. It gives you that strategic clarity and transparency, crucially essential for governance. Along with assurance, one of the key principles of Secure by Design is continual assurance. It's not only just for project and programs, but also that independent assurance within your organisation. How are you going to ensure that Secure by Design is being delivered? And by doing that, what that does is provide confidence again for the reporting back up to the senior leadership teams within your organisations. Talking about senior leadership teams and organisations, this to work has to align with organisational objectives. If it's operating in its own silo, it simply will not come to fruition. So it's key in order to make sure that that is baked in with organisational objectives, and it's an enabler and not an inhibitor. Risk management as a foundation is key, as I said. Bringing this from the outset of any project or programme lifecycle is important, and making sure that risk management is there from the outset. Identifying the risks, often it's far easier to identify the risks and manage them effectively than it is to ignore them, find them further down the road and having to retrofit security, which often costs far more money. So key benefits, strengthens decision making, not only at the project and programme level, but also when you push into the strategic lanes within the senior leadership teams. By having that better transparency and clarity and governance, that provides a better picture of what's going on in your organisation. Crucially, provides organisational resilience. The key aim of risk management is to drive resilience, have a resilient operating organisation. By putting this from the outset, you're instantly driving resilience to start considering how you're going to deal with certain instances, looking at risks and analysing them and seeing how you can mitigate them. Meet regulatory mandates. Fundamentally, this is CDDO activity that's been mandated down to all government departments. Depending on whether you're Tier 1 or Tier 2, it's coming if it's not already. So, crucially, something to get on board with. Now, the key thing with this is Secure by Design as an activity, as a framework, fundamentally plays back into the CAF and GovAssure. You'll find if you have a Secure by Design programme implemented correctly, effectively and efficiently, you'll find the vast majority of CAF is actually answered for you and provides you the evidence to do that. It also produces a long-term cost, as I briefly mentioned earlier. By putting security from the outset and appropriately risk managing it from the discovery phase, if you're talking agile language, and again, this can be played with various different models, that's really key. What that does is it cuts down on the cost, and actually by engineering security from the outset, becomes baked into the design. So, 4 key areas that we break Secure by Design down into, which makes it far easier to handle. So the first bit is assessment and planning. It's really important to identify the gaps within Secure by Design. What are you already doing, and what potentially are you not doing, or do you need to increase the maturity of what you are doing? The next lane is implementation support. So we appreciate that in many of the organisations we've worked with, I've spent a lot of time with the MOD for the last 10 years, and along with a couple of other government departments implementing Secure by Design. So I know firsthand that the implementation support needs to get right to the lowest levels. The project and programme teams, they need the correct advice, they need correct consultancy. And that's something we do in order to start that process and maintain that process throughout a product lifecycle. Policy and governance. Crucially, within the public sector, without policy, it's really hard to get anything to be effective within an organisation. So we see this as one of the key building blocks, and we'll come to a case study in a minute that really kind of epitomises that. Along with the governance, if you haven't got the governance in order to roll it out, educate, and then do a continual assurance to make sure that it's being done correctly and to the right maturity, it's really difficult to actually gauge if it's happening at all. And with that, as I said, that continual assurance, not only to make sure that you're meeting the mandates of the CDDO, but also that continual assurance can drive your governance, can drive your risk reporting upwards, and provide your senior leadership team with that kind of organisational risk as well as the cybersecurity risks. So, case study very recently from Central Government Department. Fundamentally went in, had a look at where those gaps were, identified very quickly that policy was key, created a policy document that provided all of the key areas so that anybody who was doing this in the project or programme lifecycle could understand what they needed to do and when, along with tooling in order to assist with this, not only at the project level, but also that feeds back into that governance and reporting. Fundamentally, the risk management, clarity, improved, and actually understanding what those risks were in the project were really key. Efficient project delivery is fundamentally the point of Secure by Design, making sure that it becomes an enabler and not an inhibitor, giving you that framework in order to bake that in from the outset and that is streamlined throughout rather than clunky checkpoints with a cybersecurity consultant or member of your team. Fundamentally, having this from the start makes the whole process so much more efficient. And finally, it gives stakeholder confidence. So clients have far better clarity, understanding. They can see the added bonuses of not just implementing Secure by Design so that meets the mandate of the CDDO, but they've gained a continual assurance route which they previously didn't have in the project space, but then also that governance to keep reporting and providing them that clarity and transparency to provide confidence back to the senior leadership team. So that's a quick canter through Secure by Design. Hopefully that's shown that Secure by Design, yes, it needs to come in, but if it's done appropriately, correctly, efficiently and effectively, then fundamentally it can give you so much more than just meeting the mandate of the CDDO. And hopefully all of the various different challenges that you'll hear this morning and you'll inevitably hear this afternoon, this bakes in a really key framework in order to deliver that.
Chris Cox, I'm the Director of Managed Services at Codea and TMC3. Key part of my role is managing our SOC capability as an organisation for our various customers, which which I'm going to talk to you about today. For a couple of minutes, just touch on some of the challenges running a SOC can bring internally, and also some of the benefits of the SOC of the future with public sector. So we work with lots of customers, cybersecurity strategy across the board, and running a SOC oftentimes that comes up as a conversation. And we're often find customers see very similar challenges, and Adam touched on some of this earlier in his talk. Skills are a real challenge in this space, so there is a skills shortage. When you think about the skills you need to run a SOC, you've got analysts, security engineers, architects, people that need to reach into the wider organization to build that capability. They're expensive, they're on long notice periods, so one of the challenges we see is even if an organization chooses to build that SOC capability, by the time you've onboarded a team, ramped them up into your organization and built the SOC, you can be looking at a 12-month return on investment before you've even touched your security posture from a SOC standpoint. When you then start to think about 24/7, 365 sort of MDR capabilities, unfortunately the attackers tend to work around the clock and don't abide to our business hours. It gets proportionally more expensive again. You're starting to look at shifts, groups of teams, and before you know it, you're needing 15 to 20 people to manage this capability in-house. And then a further challenge we see is evolving business requirements. So whether you're looking at public sector with key dates in the calendars each year, or even in the retail industry where you've got peak trading, the challenges come that SOC teams often need to burst in capacity and capability, and that can be a real challenge if you're doing that internally. So that's something that's often doesn't come up until it becomes a problem within the organisation. And then finally, as Adam said, the continual investment into that team, in those individuals. The cyber landscape's constantly evolving, as is the technology stack. So the teams we employ and the teams within public sector and industry, they spend a large amount of their time learning, developing, and that takes a large investment from the employer or the organisation employing them. And again, this is something that people fail to recognise up front, and it's something we advise on quite often. And I think that's where the SOC of the future, and describing what we mean by SOC of the future, and what difference like an MSSP such as TMC3 Codea can bring to organisations across the public sector. And that understanding comes in the four main points you see. And when you converse a SOC of the future to a traditional SOC, the adaptive capability of that SOC. So when we're working with a customer to implement a SOC capability as their managed partner, one of the first things we do is work across the organisation and across the departments within that organisation to understand the business requirements. We build threat scorecards that will often differ between different departments because what might be a low-level threat in one area could be a medium or even high-level threat in another based on context. So we adapt the SOC capability to the business requirements of the organisation. I think automation is when the SOC of the future really starts to come to life. We look to automate as much as possible. We're working across many different industries, government bodies, many customers. So we have a lot more data. We see a lot more attacks out in the ecosystem. And that allows us to build better detections, faster detections, and just a stronger, robust capability. I think when the true strength of the SOC of the future kicks in is the intelligence piece and managed threat intelligence. As you can imagine, this is where we're leveraging Gen AI and machine learning capabilities to really trawl through terabytes and terabytes of intelligence around, it could be all kinds of things, new malware, new attack vectors, bad actors, bad domains. All of that intelligence is being processed by the day, by the hour, and continually feeds into our response capabilities. And it really helps us keep our customers and our own SOC ahead of the attack landscape and mitigate those risks as they occur and before they actually happen. And I think should the worst or when the worst happens and there is an attack, I think the increase in demand and the increase in scale that's required to deal with that effectively, that's where an MSSP can really scale quickly. We've already got these SOC teams in place. they understand the landscape, they understand the technology stacks, of which there are various. So we can, not only can we burst in capacity very quickly, we can also burst in capability very quickly. So it allows us to respond to whether that's a bad actor or a state-sponsored attack or whatever it might be. We can respond to that very quickly, but then we can peel that back as well. Once that has been resolved, we can scale that back very quickly, which is very difficult to do with an in-house SOC team. So that's some of the overall benefits.